Hello and welcome to episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. Today is Wednesday, August 23rd. Hope everybody has a good day so far and had a good rest of their day yesterday. We've got a lot to get into here today on a Wednesday podcast, coming off another rough night last night in New York baseball as the Yankees fall 2-1 and the New York Mets fall 3-2 in Atlanta against the Braves. They took game one on Monday, lost yesterday. So Jose Quintana and Charlie Morton will take the ball today for the Mets and the Braves in the rubber game of that series. The Yankees lose game number one of a three-game set against the Nationals, and they have now lost 9 straight games for the first time since 1982. No current player on this Yankee roster was alive, I should say. No current player on this Yankee roster was alive the last time the New York Yankees dropped 9 straight games, and that was back in 1982. And I believe if they lose tonight with Sevy on the mound, which is highly likely, they will drop 10 straight games, which would be the first time since, I believe, 1913 when they were still playing at the Polo Grounds. That was the last time they dropped 10 straight. So we'll see if the Yankees can hit new levels of low tonight against the Nationals in Game 2 of a 3-game set. We'll get to a little bit of Yankee baseball later on. We'll get to a little bit of the young kids getting called up, and not so much talking about their performances last night and the Yankees' performance last night, but who potentially could be next in line to get called up for the New York Yankees. Is it Austin Wells? Could he become a September call-up? Could it potentially be Jason Dominguez? Are those guys your call-ups next year? Is Jason Dominguez going to take a similar path to an Anthony Volpe where he plays 20 to 25 games in AAA and then gets called up next year in spring training? What to expect the rest of the way for the Yankees in terms of calling up some of the other young guys in the AAA system and the farm system. So we'll get to that later on. We'll start today with a little bit of football, talking about the New York Jets offensive line, as yesterday we got reports from Connor Hughes, 2 big reports from Connor Hughes. Number one, and Robert Saleh as well. But number one, Becton is going to start at right tackle this week against the Giants, and all signs are pointing towards Mekhi Becton starting week 1 at right tackle, which is a huge, huge plus for the New York Jets offensive line. And then later yesterday, a little bit before Hard Knocks, so you had the excitement of Hard Knocks, and you get the news across that Dwayne Brown is going to get activated off the PUP list today, and he's going to be ready to go for the season. He'll be at left tackle, and you expect your offensive line to look complete now, and you feel a lot better about it than you did even just a couple days ago with the emergence of Mekhi Becton at right tackle, and now Dwayne Brown making his return. So we'll get to that here to start off the show. Obviously, we'll get to the Yankees and Nationals later on. We'll also get you set for Mets Braves tonight, the rubber game of a 3-game set in Atlanta, and game number 2 of a 3-game set for the New York Yankees as they wrap up a 6-game homestand. 0-4 so far on the homestand, so we'll see what they can do over the next 2 games. I'm not expecting much because this is a Yankee team that is just losing and they're not any good, so I fully expect at least a series loss, probably another series sweep. So we will see how these next 2 games take place. But we'll start today with a little bit of football as we are now 19 days away from the start of the New York Jets NFL regular season. Jets-Bills, Monday Night Football, MetLife Stadium, 19 days away. Tomorrow we are officially 2 weeks away from the start of the NFL season. Thursday Night Football, it'll be the Lions-Chiefs opening up the NFL regular season. And then obviously Sunday will be 2 weeks out from the first full Sunday of football. And in 2 weeks from next Monday, we will be 2 weeks out from Jets-Bills. So we are getting closer each day that goes by. We are getting closer and closer and closer to the start of the NFL regular season. And if you're a Jets and Giants fan, you're getting excited, and especially if you're a Jets fan, because this is the beginning of what is hopefully a very successful journey with Aaron Rodgers. And I just kind of open up here. No matter which way this journey, no matter which way these 2 years goes, assuming Aaron Rodgers plays 2 seasons, it's going to be a fun ride. It's going to be a wild ride. There's never been this much media attention on the Jets. There's never been this much popularity on the Jets. The Jets have never had this much primetime games. There's so much excitement with this team. No matter which way it goes, no matter what takes place over these next 2 years, over these next 2 seasons, or even just this season, it's going to be a lot of fun. So as you get closer to the season, you start to actually narrow down the rosters. Rosters start to be made. You got to make some cuts this week. Next week at Tuesday, I believe it's 4 Eastern, I think it is the official cut down. Teams got to get down to 53-man rosters and to get set for the NFL season, which obviously be a week later. And for the New York Jets, you look at this roster, it's one of the most complete rosters that they've had in a very long time. You got your quarterback, you feel good about your receivers, you feel good about your tight ends, your running backs, defensive side of the football, you love the defensive line, you love your corners, you know your safeties, you feel good about. I don't know if you love them, but you feel good about them. And your linebackers, maybe only outside of Jamie and Sherwood, you feel really good about Quincy Williams and C.J. Mosley. But the defense was fourth in the NFL last year. That's not a concern. Like, the defense as a whole, you love it. But the one concern with this New York Jets team the entire offseason has been the offensive line. Everything else on this roster is complete. And you got to give a lot of credit to Joe Douglas and his staff and Robert Saleh and everybody through the draft process, through free agency, last year, picking up guys like DJ Reed, bringing those guys in, developing a guy like a Tony Adams where he's actually going to start this season, finding guys like a Quincy Williams, diamonds in the rough. So you got to give a lot of credit. Building the depth. This defensive line is legitimately 10-man deep. So there's a lot of excitement around this defense. The biggest concern has been the offensive line. And the media has taken the offensive line and thrown it all over the place because what the media, specifically some radio shows in the area, some individual people in the area, in the New York area, radio shows have thought it would be a good idea to continue to bash the Jets, bash the offensive line, continue to talk about, a lot of people have talked about how the Giants are so good. They don't have any blemishes, but when you look at the Jets, their offensive line's a serious concern. And no doubt about it, it was a concern, but it has now turned into a situation where you feel really good about this offensive line, or maybe not really good, but you feel confident. You feel good about this offensive line. You're not going into the season really that concerned about the offensive line. You're going into the 2023 campaign feeling good that this offensive line might not be top 5, might not be the offensive lines that they had back in the Rex Ryan, Mark Sanchez days where you had Nick Mangold, DeBrickashaw, Ferguson, all those guys. But you feel good about this offensive line, that it can be a good, solid, above average, top 15, top 13, top 12 offensive line in football. I don't think it's top 5. I don't think it'll be top 3. It's not top 7, probably not top 10, but it can be top 15. It can be above average. It's a solid offensive line that Aaron Rodgers can trust, and an offensive line that's got some good mix of some veteran and some youth talent. So again, when you look at this team, and part of the reasons with the offensive line, I think part of the reasons we've all had to be a little patient throughout this process is the majority of camp, it was all backups. Like I mentioned this the other day on my Jets podcast last week. Officially a week ago today, actually, the Jets-Bucks had joint practices. And I was out at practice. I was out at joint practice, Jets-Bucks. And remember walking away from that day, hearing all the media, driving home, listening to sports radio, and hearing everybody talk about how the Jets let up 6 sacks against the Bucks. And everybody was, this offense line's terrible. What a joke. This team, this is going to derail the Jets season, all these things. But when you look back at that offensive line that day, it was Billy Turner, Max Mitchell at the 2 tackle spots. You didn't have AVT or Lincoln Tomlinson. The guards were Tittman and Wes Schweitzer. And your center was McGovern, who's going to be the solid center, who's going to be your center. But the only guy in that offensive line that's actually going to start was McGovern. The 4 other guys aren't going to start. So my point here is, when this offensive line is healthy and when it's fully together, it's a solid group. And I think at times, again, because there was concerns about Becton, there was concerns if Dwayne Brown would ever come back. If he comes back, how good would he be? What's the center situation? If you had to move AV2 to tackle, then who's your guard? There was a lot of different combinations that could have went wrong, but the most realistic situation happened. And the most realistic situation that happened was Becton at right and Dwayne Brown at left. Now, you also do realize, a lot of people do have to realize, too, throughout camp, they played Becton at left tackle. It was just until last week where they started to give Becton some right tackle reps. He went into the game, played right tackle, looked great doing it, had 28 snaps at a PFF grade of 85 at a 76.7 pass blocking grade and a 90.2 run blocking grade. And another thing, I mentioned this on the Monday show, but the Jets had 16 carries for 105 yards against the Bucks. 76 of those 105 yards Becton was on the field for. They only ran for 29 yards when Becton wasn't on the field. So his presence was in the running blocking game and pass blocking, pancaking guys, absolutely dominating, mauling people over, being that legitimate power offensive lineman that we all know Becton can be and why we drafted him 11th overall. And I think people at times forget that. We didn't draft Becton at 11th overall in the 2020 draft for nothing. Like, this guy's got a lot of talent. The biggest thing with Becton, the biggest concern with Becton has been the health and the weight, which kind of ties in together. And the endurance as well going into this year, where his first preseason game, he only played 7 snaps, and you walked away a little concerned. Like, that's not going to cut in a regular season game, but he played 27 against Carolina and played 28 last week, and now he's going to start this week. And you feel good about it. And you got to give a lot of credit to Becton for officially earning kind of that starting role. Obviously, he's still got more work to do. He talked about it yesterday. He's not taking this and feeling like this is the job's finished. He still feels like he has a lot more to earn and a lot more to prove, which is great. Good mindset. He completely changed the mindset, which is great. But you now go into this season, and this is your offensive line. And as a New York Jets fan, or even just a football fan, you can't sit here and tell me this is a bad offensive line. It's a good, solid offensive line. Left to right, you got Dwayne Brown at left tackle, Lincoln Tomlinson at left guard. Your center is going to be probably McGovern, especially with Tittman missing some time now, although he'll be back ready for week 1. Potentially Tittman plays a role this season. Who knows? But McGovern at center. Right guard AVT, right tackle Becton. And you especially like that right side. AVT entering year 3, and you've got Becton obviously entering technically year number 4, but finally healthy and ready to go and potentially could put together a season like he had his rookie year. Now, I know, again, there's a lot of ifs, but there's always a lot of ifs in a lot of things in sports. I know you could always play the what-if game, the if this, if that, but realistically, when you look at this offensive line, you go left to right. Dwayne Brown last year, and I think this is too got to be a guy that it's got to be a guy too that I think a lot of people have looked at last year and have to kind of change their view on it a little bit, because remember last season, Dwayne Brown played with a torn rotator cuff. He missed the first 4 games of the season, was put on IR first 4 games of the season. He came back, played 12 games last year. He missed the final game against Miami. So he played 12 games last season. And in those 12 games was solid. And the crazy thing about Dwayne Brown is he got, the Jets gave him, I forget the exact numbers of the contract, but the Jets signed him to a deal. He hurt his shoulder in camp like a week before the season started. The Jets kind of were scrambling to figure out who was going to play left tackle or who the tackles were going to be, how it was all going to play out, because obviously Becton earlier in camp got hurt. That's the reason they brought Dwayne Brown in. But all of those things, Dwayne Brown last year easily, and this is one part that's underrated, he easily last year, Dwayne Brown, could have easily said, I'm done, I'm either hanging it up, retiring, or I'm going to take the surgery, or never mind. I'm going to take the surgery and miss the entire season. And that's, he easily could have said that and said, I'm going to get paid, take the surgery, sit out the entire year, and that's what I'm going to do. But instead, he was a warrior, and Saleh gave him a ton of credit. They actually had an award after him. I think the Jets made an award after him for his ability to go out there, play hurt. Easily could have said, yeah, I'm out of here. Take the surgery, let me get paid. Maybe I'll come back next year. I'll take the money, get the surgery, miss the season, get paid, then retire. And will not play a single snap for the Jets in the regular season. He easily could have done that. Instead, he fought through an injury, played even late in the season where they were struggling and they fell apart and they collapsed, played 12 games with a torn rotator cuff, elected not to get the surgery, and for playing hurt, for playing through something at 37 years old that needs surgery, he did a fine job. I know some people maybe look at his run blocking and maybe it wasn't the best at times, and maybe there were some moments where he got out of his breaks a little slow and got beat a couple times, but for a guy that was 37 playing with a torn rotator cuff, he gave you everything you could ask for. After missing the first 4 games, he played 12 games in a row until the last game of the season. Like, he did what he needed to do. It's not like he tried to go out there, play with a torn rotator cuff, and only ended up playing 4 games with the Jets last season. He gave the Jets a lot of quality snaps. He easily could have said, I'm done. I'm taking the surgery. And it would have put the Jets even more in a hole last year. Instead, went out there and played a very solid tackle with a torn rotator cuff. So my whole thing here is, too, with Dwayne Brown. I know some people say, look at the age, oh, he's old. Well, here's the thing with that is our quarterback is up there, too. Like, there's some veterans on this team. Like, looking at Dwayne Brown, I understand he's 38, but people have to realize he was 37 last year. Played solid. He was a solid offensive lineman for us last season. Was 37 years old with a torn rotator cuff. He is now healthy, going to be 38. I don't know, like, I don't know if I want to say he's going to be great, but you certainly feel confident in him. Like you assume he can very well be better than he actually was last year because he's healthy. A 37-year-old with a torn rotator cuff versus a 38-year-old that is healthy. I'm taking the 38-year-old who's a year older healthy than the 37-year-old playing with a torn rotator cuff. So I think personally, Dwayne Brown can only be better than he was last year because he was playing hurt the entire season. He's now healthy. And you feel good about that. And he got cleared yesterday. So, again, maybe he starts off to, maybe if you want to nitpick the offensive line and look at a concern and say, oh, well, he hasn't practiced. Well, he's 38 years old. He's been in the league for a very long time. This is a guy that is not like he's a rookie that needs to learn a completely different new playbook, needs to learn a new system, needs to get a feel for the game in 2 weeks. This is a guy that's been in the league for a very long time. He can step right in and play at a high level. And we saw that last year. He missed the first 4 weeks, stepped in, and played well. And you expect the same this season. And again, it's a nice mix of some veterans, some youth. Becton's still young, AVT's still young, and you got veterans like Dwayne Brown, Lakin Tomlinson, and obviously McGovern as well. So it's a nice mix. This offensive line left to right, I think if you're a New York Jets fan, you wake up today feeling very good about this offensive line, especially with the news yesterday coming across that Dwayne Brown's off the PUP list, or will be today. Aaron Rodgers, he's going to trust this offensive line. And I'll ask you this, for the people listening at home, watching at home. This offensive line going into this season was the one we expected. Salah's talked about putting the best 5 guys out there. And the best 5 guys was Becton on the right side, Dwayne Brown on the left side, and everybody else at the same spots. Now, maybe some people thought it'd be Tippmann over McGovern, but McGovern I don't think is bad. I think McGovern's solid, and maybe some point in the season Tippmann gets some time. But ultimately, I think Tippmann's your future. Like, McGovern's probably here for one more season, and Tippmann's your future guy. And I think that's the way the Jets are going to roll with it. But you got to feel good about this offensive line. You got to feel confident about this offensive line. I like this offensive line. I feel good about this offensive line going into week 1. I do. And again, the Jets, I think, are going to also run some different sets. If you want to run 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, or you want to put up a tight end, maybe Dwayne Brown early on, you want to put a tight end on Dwayne Brown's next to Dwayne Brown to help him, to give some tight end help, go ahead and do that. Again, early in the season, if the offensive line maybe is having a little bit of a tough time meshing, the Jets can always, I think they're going to hold a fullback. I think they're going to hold Nick Baldwin. They've obviously got, obviously you could hold up a running back there. You can go full on, 2 tight end sets. You could run a fullback. Like, the Jets can run, if early in the season there are some concerns with the way this offense is constructed, with the way the Jets, I think, are going to play things out. The Jets, I think you could potentially see a world where they can put a lot of help with this offensive line. You can incorporate a fullback. You can incorporate some tight end help. Like, it's not like it's just those 5 guys and that's it. Like, you can put some help in there for the first couple weeks if there is a little bit of chemistry issues. But all in all, again, 3 veterans, two young guys. But AVT's proven what he can do in this league. Becton's really the only guy that's really the only guy that he's the least inexperienced guy in terms of actual playing time, because he's played 1 season and has been in the league for, this is his 4th year and he's only played 1 season. So he's the most inexperienced, but again, you have the experience on Rodgers' blind side, which you want. And you look at Lakin Tomlinson, I think you expect Lakin Tomlinson to have a better year. He had a very bad year last year. Lakin Tomlinson can't get much worse than he was last year. He can really only get better because he had a career down year. I don't think he's on this downward trajectory. I think he's going to be better. It's his first year system. The Jets offense last year, there was times where it just seemed like he had miscommunication. It was chemistry issues. There was a lot of moving parts around him. You put him into an offense line that's solidified, 5 guys, build up more chemistry with McGovern. I think you feel better about Lakin Tomlinson's ability to play at a high level this year. But hands down, this offensive line you feel good about. You feel good about. And I don't really see how somebody couldn't, because this is the offensive line we went into camp. And again, minus maybe Joe Tippmann, who many thought would start at center, which McGovern's not bad. It's just Tippmann maybe has a little bit more of a higher upside, but McGovern's solid. But either way, this is the offensive line you went into camp projecting it would be. Probably Becton at right tackle and Dwayne Brown at left tackle. And you're getting that plus the 2 guards in the center. This is the best 5 guys that the New York Jets are going to put out there. And you got to feel good about that if you're a New York Jets fan. And again, Becton, 63 snaps, 1 sack allowed, 2 pressures, no penalty, 82 PFF grade, 88.9 run blocking grade in his 3 games of the preseason, and has played more snaps each and every week and gets an opportunity this week to go out there and play against the starter. So a lot to like with this New York Jets offensive line. And all the people out there talking about the concerns, which for a while it certainly was a concern, but the Jets are dwindling down the issues with the they now you look at this roster, and if I had to give you another concern, it'd be the linebacker. Not CJ and Quincy. It is Sherwood. Potentially could Zaire Barnes take over Sherwood. I think Sherwood sometimes just seems a little overwhelmed at times. He's shown flashes, but it's just about consistency with him now. But you feel great about the secondary, feel great about the defensive line. If you want to nitpick and you want to get more X's and O's, hopefully the Jets this year are better covering tight ends than they were last year, where, the safeties, hopefully they're better against tight ends, some of the linebackers as well. I thought Mosley was good last year, but maybe more of a Quincy Williams, like those guys against tight ends. Maybe that's it, but your defense was 4th in the NFL last season. You expect it to be, if anything, even better because some of these guys are entering year 2 where they can take a jump. So, a lot to like with this New York Jets team. It is now complete, and you feel fully ready to go for week 1 against the Buffalo Bills. And I wouldn't be against either. I know some people have mentioned this, and I talked a little about this yesterday in my live stream. I wouldn't be against bringing in a guy like a Jason Peters just as depth. I wouldn't be. I understand he's 42 and he's up there in age, but if you can get him on like the vet minimum, if you can get him for a low cost to just be depth, I wouldn't be against it. I do it now before somebody goes down because I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think the Jets will do that, but if somebody would to go down, Jason Peters is going to want more at that point because his role is going to be bigger. Joe Douglas does have ties with him from the Philly days, so I don't know. It'd be interesting. I don't think he ends up here, but it is an interesting name to keep an eye out for because it does seem like Carter Warren seems like he's more of a project, seems like he's more of kind of a redshirt guy. Him and Tittman seem like they're more projects. Well, Tittman, not really. Tittman, they just seem like they're using Tittman as a redshirt year. If Tittman probably could realistically play, and he might play this year, Carter Warren seems like he's more of a project, which is fine because you've got guys in front of him. It's not like we were relying on Carter Warren to be a starter this year. So, either way, that's your offensive line. Comment down below. What are your thoughts on the New York Jets offensive line? Like it, feel good about it, and ultimately, do you see any more? I mean, there isn't really many more holes on this Jet team. This was it, and it's filled, and it's not a hole anymore, and you feel good about it. All right, so now I move on here to a little bit of baseball. As the New York Yankees lost last night 2-1 against the Washington Nationals. I'll tell you this. I got to give a lot of credit to the Nationals. They've been one of the better teams actually in baseball since the All-Star break. They put together a really good year, and I went into not a really good year, but they put together a good season for their standards in terms of a rebuild. Their rebuild seems to be ahead of schedule. I talked a little about this in the offseason. I actually talked to the Nationals play-by-play broadcaster, Bob Carpenter. It was an awesome interview on my baseball channel, or Bubbs Talking Bronx Bombers. Now it's a Yankees channel, or on my podcast, Apple Podcasts, all that good stuff. And I talked to him, and I remember kind of, just takeaways from that interview. I remember saying, like, the Nationals aren't going to be an easy, just some team that you see on the schedule and it's an easy 3 wins. And I felt that going into the season. And again, this is going to be Yankees talking in a second, but I just want to start with the Nationals because I watched the Little League World Classic. You've heard about them a lot. You saw them last night. We'll see them again today and tomorrow. They've got some really good young pieces. I've got a couple guys on my fantasy team, so I've been following them. I got Josiah Gray, Mackenzie Gore, and I've got Lane Tomlinson, C.J. Abrams. So I've got like 4 Nationals on my fantasy team. They're 4 probably best players. I've got them on my team. So, they have Joey Meneses. They've got guys, in the farm system like Hassel and James Wood. They've got some really good pieces. And they're ahead of schedule. And I remember going into the year too, like with the Mets, and I remember saying, like last year, the Nationals, you went to go play the Nationals, and it was an easy 3-game sweep. Like you went into that series and you said, yeah, this is easy. 4-game series, the least you can do is take 3 or 4. You got to win the series against the Nationals, but that's not the case anymore. I mean, they're 58-68. They're 8-2 in their last 10. And they're actually, it's funny. I continue to say this, but the Yankees are 10.5 games out of a wild card spot, and they're still technically trying to win. The Nationals and these other teams who are in a rebuild are closer to a wild card spot than the Yankees are in the National League, which is hilarious to me because it just shows you that the Yankees stink that bad. But I've actually been impressed with the Nationals this year. I think they've been good, and they've got some pieces, and they've got some guys coming up. Nationals are going to be good very soon. They're going to be back to being that team very soon. They just extended Davey Martinez, their manager, and their GM as well. They've, Mike Rizzo. They've done a lot. They've done a lot of good things. Like they've rebuilt their farm system. The farm system was not in a good spot after that World Series. They've rebuilt it. They've done a very good job rebuilding it with the Max Scherzer and Trey Turner trades in 2020 or 2021, and then last year making the Juan Soto trade in 2022. This year bringing some guys back in the Jameer Candelario trade. They've done a good job bringing in rentals and then trading them and getting some pieces back. There's a lot to like with the Nationals team. I will say that. And watching the game last night, I know they only put up 2 runs, and Rodon actually pitched fine. He pitched decent. I mean, he only had 1 strikeout, which doesn't really matter. But the Yankees still lost, and that's all that matters. I mean, did Rodon go out there and give you a $160 million performance? No. $160 million performance to me is 7 innings, 8 Ks. That's what 160. That's what Garrett Cole does. Oh, they didn't do it against the Red Sox. I don't like Rodon. I'll tell it like it is. Rodon's got to do a lot for me to gain respect. I have not liked him very much. Like I know being that in a negative way. Maybe that came across wrong. I mean, like I don't trust Rodon, I should say. Rodon's got to do a lot more for me to begin to trust him. He's got to go out and do it for a full season. If he puts together 3 good outings, I'm not going to try. I need to see more from Rodon. I need to see a lot more. 1 start where the Yankees still lost. No, it's not his fault. I think his next start will probably be against the Tigers, so he'll get a really bad team there. But either way, Nationals. There's my Nationals rant. Good team. And I remember going into the year with the Mets saying the Nationals aren't going to be a team that's just going to, you go into and they were a 55-win team last year. They were, I think, they had the worst record in baseball. And I think the A's were next to them. They were horrible. What was it? 55-1, something like that. 107, I think. 55 and 107. Yeah, 55 and 107, I think it was. Because that's 162. But either way, they've been good. And again, the Mets, like going into the season, you were like, this isn't going to be a team that you're just going to dominate. They're going to be a team that's going to be competitive. I had a feeling they were going to be pretty competitive, and they are. I mean, they're 10 games under 500 again, but they're not trying to win. But they've been really good, and they have a chance to finish under the 10-game mark, meaning they have a chance to finish 6-7 games under 500, which is not bad considering a team that won 55 games a year ago. It's still August, and they've already surpassed their win total from a year ago. So a lot to like. And I will tell you this. They've had a lot of games this year where they've lost because of the bullpen in terms of, like, they've blown games. So there was, like, probably 5-6 games that if you even just take 3 of those games back, their record looks completely different. They're a 61-win team. They're a 61-65 team as opposed to a 58-68. And there's been a handful of games that they've missed. They could easily be 4 games under 500 as opposed to 10 games. Easily. They could be 5 games under 500. Their record could be a lot better than what it really is. But anyway, that's my Nationals rant. I know you didn't click on the video to hear that. But the New York Yankees called up 2 guys yesterday. Oswald Peraza, they brought back up. Everson Pereira, they brought up as well. Left fielder. 2 guys that'll probably get a lot of playing time. Neither did a whole lot last night. I mean, the Yankees had Ben Rortvedt was the Yankees offense last night, and anytime those words come out of your mouth, it's a rough night. He had all the Yankees hits. He went 2 for 2 with a home run, a walk, and a run scored. So that was Ben Rortvedt's night last night. Other than that, nothing going. Judge struck out 3 times. Stan struck out again. The lineup is lifeless. There is nothing going with this lineup. The team stinks. I mean, you just look up and down the lineup. It's so bad. Everson Pereira went 0 for 3 with a strikeout, and Peraza went 0 for 4. So not a whole lot going for the young guys last night, but it was their first time out again, or for Peraza it was. But Everson Pereira getting called up. We've talked a little bit about Peraza on the show already. Expect both guys to get a lot of playing time. Expect both guys to get opportunities. The season's over. You're not going anywhere. Bring up guys that are going to get opportunities and roll with it. And that's all you can do at this point in the season. But, this season with Pereira, he's hit 300 at the AAA level, or, this season in the minor leagues, he's hit 300. With AAA, though, to be more specific, he's hit 312, 386, 551's his slash line with a 937 OPS. He's had a really good season, and he's been really hot recently. Like his last 90 games, his last 30 games, he's been really hot, been playing really well. He's been primarily playing just left field, which I think a lot of us Yankee fans, when we kind of heard that he might be getting called up and you saw him primarily just playing left field, you kind of knew it was coming because he was going to get called up. He was going to play left field. He wasn't going to play center field or right field if he was going to get called up because obviously Bader and Judge are out there. So he was going to play left. Boone did say that he could potentially play other positions in the outfield. He could play all three technically, but he's going to be left field. He has an opportunity to boost his case going into spring training next year at the end of this season to show this organization that he could potentially be the answer in left field for a very long time. Hopefully he is the answer in left field. A general manager in Brian Cashman that has completely avoided the left field spot gives an opportunity now to go out there and prove that he can be the future at left field, and we'll see what he can do. Peraza is going to primarily play third, but again, he could play second, could play short, can play third, can play three positions on the infield. Two guys that can do a little bit of everything. You know, I know last night wasn't any good. Maybe he provides a little bit of a young jolt, provides a little bit of speed, a little bit of youth. It gives you just a little bit of a reason to watch these games. And that's the way I looked at it too yesterday. Like, watching the Yankee game last night, I was interested a little bit more than I was a day ago because the two young kids were in the lineup, and you want to see what they can do. And all you can do is just hope that they show some positives. It doesn't have to all be pretty. They're going to have their rough moments. It's, Volpe's the same way. He's going to have ups and downs, but, you just hope that they can go out there, put together some good at-bats, put together some hits, maybe come up with some big hits, come up, some big moments, make some plays on defense. Just show some positives, and I hope that's what they do. And again, last night wasn't a whole lot. See what they can do tonight against Mackenzie Gore. Now, when you look at other guys that could potentially get called up, Austin Wells, I think, is a name to keep an eye out for. Has put together a very nice season, especially at AAA. He's actually better at AAA than he has at AA. The Yankees catcher situation is abysmal. I mean, I know Rortvedt hit a home run last night, but which will probably earn him a spot in the lineup for the next week because that's how Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman roll. But either way, you got Rortvedt, Higgy. Neither of those guys are any good. I'd call up Austin Wells and give him an opportunity. Lefty bat, power, Yankee Stadium. You assume he's probably the future at catcher. Give him an opportunity. Next year, he should be up at the major league level. Potentially, he could be a call-up within the next 2 weeks or so. Maybe you let him get a little bit more time in AAA, then call him up legitimately as your September call-up in September and let him roll out for the final month of the season. Same thing with Jason Dominguez. I don't think Dominguez is going to get called up. He just got called up to AAA. I don't think he's going to get called up this year. I think a lot of Yankee fans that want to see that. I don't think it's going to happen. I think Dominguez, who actually had a hit last night in his AAA debut, I think Dominguez is going to get called up next year, similar to Volpe. I think he's going to have a competition, or there's going to be maybe some sort of competition, or he's going to have to prove it in spring training, and if he does, he gets the job. And that's why I think the Yankees are going to do with Dominguez. He's going to play 20, 25 games in Scranton and get called up, because that's what last year happened. Peraza got called up to AAA, or called up to the MLB last year late in the season. Volpe got called up to AAA. Volpe played like half August and September in AAA, and he got called up, obviously, the start of this season and during spring training. So, same thing there with Dominguez. I think Dominguez plays the rest of the season at AAA, similar to what Volpe does. If he shows enough positives, goes into spring training, if he does well in spring training and earns the spot, I think he'll be in the lineup next year. So, look, it's possible next season. And I think in an ideal world next year, if the Yankees go ahead and, fire everybody and, blow it up and retool, you would like to see a lot of these young guys up next year. Peraza, Everson Pereira, Jason Dominguez, Austin Wells. Those four guys, I think, deserves opportunities to have spots in the lineup come opening day next season. Now, if the Yankees go along their path that they've been going along, I don't know if you'll see all four of those guys. I don't know if they'll just keep Peraza, keeping him in the minors, because that's what the Yankees like to do. Peraza, this next month for Peraza is big because he hasn't shown you a whole lot this season, but hopefully with consistent playing time, he can, because the Yankees haven't utilized him in a right way. They just haven't. They've just destroyed him in terms of the way they've utilized him. And you hope that he can bounce back and recover from he's been up and down 3 times. You don't do that to one of your top prospects. You either call your top prospect up and keep him up, or you don't use your top prospect as a 27th man on a doubleheader. Call him up, sit the bench, maybe get a pinch hit appearance, and then leave. It's not what you do. That's not what you do with one of your top prospects. But the Yankees have done it, and that's the whole player development thing. And ideally, you call these guys up next year, you let them get some run. Hopefully at that point the player development's better because the Yankees blow it up and retool, which I don't think they will. But the young guys are up, and we'll see who else is up. I think Wells might get called up. I don't think Dominguez is going to get called up. I will tell you that. If you're a Yankee fan that wants Dominguez to get called up, which, again, I think it's certainly possible that he'll get called up next year. He should, because next year is his estimated time of arrival. It is 2024. I don't think you'll see him up this season. I mean, you're asking him then to play 2 weeks in AAA and get called up. I just don't see it. It's basically Volpe all over again. Call up Volpe next year. Or, well, this time last year, you were getting ready to call up Volpe the next season, potentially. Same thing this year. So, we'll see. I mean, that's if none of these guys get traded or just buried in the farm system this year. But, it gives you a little bit more of a reason to watch these games because this team stinks. And I don't know. I mean, I've gone to 2 Yankee games this year. I went to the one at Rockies in Coors Field in Denver when they blew that game. Blew 2-2-run lead. Like, they blew like 3 2-run leads after the 8th inning. It was something crazy. And I went to the one at Yankee Stadium, Yankees-Astros, the finale of that 4-game series. And I just, both games were super painful. At this point in the season where at least, coming out of the All-Star break, the Yankees still had a chance. Like, they were, I think 2 games out of a wild card spot. I knew they weren't, I didn't think they would make the playoffs, but they at least were still alive. They weren't 10.5 games out. They were 2.5 games out. But at this point in the season, I mean, these games are they're so hard to watch. I mean, being in attendance, it's probably even more hard to watch because your hard-earned money's pouring right into what is a terrible baseball team. And even with the young guys getting called up, I mean, it helps a little bit. But the offense last night was still lifeless. I mean, Pereira and Peraza, I mean, they can only do so much. I mean, they're going to have their own struggles. You can't rely on a guy that just get called up to carry an offense. You can't do that. Unfortunately, the Yankees are where they are. But Boone said last night, I think he said something like we're still in it to win it or whatever, which didn't make any sense to me because I don't know how. I don't know how this organization doesn't really. You don't hear any manager that is 10.5 games out say we're still in it to win it. You don't have, and that's not even just that's just nobody says that. Nobody in America, no manager that is 10.5 games out says, oh, we're in it to win it. Nobody says that other than Aaron Boone. He's the only one. So, anyway, that'll do it. Charlie Moore and Jose Quintana tonight. He'll be, those 2 guys will be on the mound in Atlanta for the finale of the Mets-Braves 3-game set. And as for the Yankees-Nationals, it'll be Sevy versus Mackenzie Gore tonight. So, we'll see what they can do. See if my fantasy team continues to take a boost because Mackenzie Gore's on the mound. So, anyway. That'll do it for an episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. We'll be back tomorrow talking all things sports. By the way, next week, I open up my predictions or my division predictions for the NFL. So every day, starting on Monday of next week, Monday through Friday next week, I will have all of my division predictions. And then Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the week later. So I will have, for the next 8 divisions of football for 8 days, I will have my division predictions out. So every day next week, we'll start with the AFC East, then we'll go to the NFC. We'll bounce back and forth. We'll go AFC East then to the NFC East, then we'll go AFC South, NFC South, AFC North, NFC North, AFC West, NFC West. And then we'll finish off on Wednesday. Our final prediction will be on Wednesday, which Wednesday will be the day before Thursday. So we'll have 8 days of division predictions up until Thursday of that Thursday night game, Lions-Chiefs. So next week begins our football marathon here on the podcast. We'll be talking all things NFL, opening things up with AFC East on Monday, NFC East on Tuesday, AFC South on Wednesday, NFC South on Thursday. And then we'll do AFC North on Friday, NFC North on Monday, AFC West on Tuesday, and then NFC West on Wednesday, and then Thursday, we'll get you ready for Lions-Chiefs. So 8 days straight of football starting on Monday. So stay tuned for that. we'll also have 2 more pods to wrap up the week here on tomorrow, August 24th, and then August 25th. As August comes to a close here, and football season comes alive. All right, so that'll do it for an episode of the Bubbs on Sports podcast. We'll see you all back here tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.